"You're an embarrassment to this family," my father said, loudly enough for the entire room to hear. Funny, because 3 hours later, 400 veterinarians, researchers, and the dean of the most respected veterinary college in the country gave me a standing ovation while he sat in the third row with his mouth hanging open. Let me back up. My name is Margot, and I'm 31 years old. I've spent the last 6 years doing large animal emergency surgery in some of the most remote corners of northern Ontario, places where the nearest town is 2 hours away and the roads turn to mud in April. I've performed C-sections on cattle in blizzards. I've done colic surgery on horses by flashlight when the generator quit. I've driven 4 hours through a January whiteout to save a farmer's only breeding bull because that animal was the difference between his family staying on the land or losing everything. I don't say any of this to brag. I say it because none of it, not a single moment of it, was ever considered impressive by my family. My younger sister Courtney got engaged last fall to a man named Bryce, whose family owns a chain of luxury car dealerships across southern Ontario. The wedding was planned for a Saturday in June at a restored heritage estate outside of Collingwood. It was the kind of event that required a printed seating chart, a signature cocktail, and a florist who flew in from Montreal. Courtney had been planning it for 14 months. My mother had been planning it for 14 months. My father had been funding it for 14 months, and making sure everyone knew exactly how much it was costing him. I had been saving a horse in Kapuskasing. I drove 11 hours straight to make it to the rehearsal dinner on the Friday night. My truck still had mud on the wheel wells. I parked it behind the venue so Courtney wouldn't see it in the photos. Before I go further, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever had your whole life reduced to a punchline at a dinner table, hit that like button. Because this one's for you. The rehearsal dinner was held at an Italian restaurant in Collingwood that my father had privately bought out for the evening. Long table, candlelight, Bryce's parents at one end and my parents at the other, with everyone else arranged in between according to importance. I found my place card near the kitchen. Not near the kitchen in a charming tucked-away sort of way, near the kitchen in a we ran out of room sort of way. I sat down and ordered sparkling water and tried to feel happy for my sister, which I genuinely was. Courtney and I had never been close, exactly, but I didn't hate her. She'd just grown up differently than me. She liked pretty things, she was good at Instagram, and she'd found a man who wanted to pay for her life the way our father always had. There's nothing wrong with that. What was wrong was the way my family talked about me in comparison, which I didn't fully understand until that dinner. Bryce's father, a large man with a firm handshake and opinions about everything, asked around the table what everyone did for a living. It went around. Bryce's brother worked in finance, his sister was in marketing, my mother said she kept the family running, and everyone laughed warmly. Then it got to my father. He cleared his throat, he picked up his wine glass, and then he gestured toward me at the far end of the table with this particular smile he has. The one that means he's about to say something, ask my spasa and dress it up as a compliment. "Margot's a vet," he said. "You know, out in the bushes somewhere, she's very dedicated." He paused. "We always thought she'd do something in medicine, but she went the animal route." He chuckled. Bryce's father chuckled. My mother touched her pearls. The animal route. 11 hours of driving, 6 years of emergency calls at 3 in the morning. A doctoral thesis on bovine respiratory disease that took me 4 years to finish while working full-time. Reduced to the animal route. I smiled and said nothing. I was very good at that by then. After dinner, when the table broke into smaller conversations, I stepped outside for air. The patio wrapped around the back of the restaurant, and there was a gas fire pit out there, not yet lit, with a few wrought iron chairs around it. I sat down and looked at the dark shapes of the trees at the edge of the property. I heard the door open behind me. I assumed it was Courtney wanting to go over tomorrow's schedule, so I turned around with a ready smile. But it wasn't Courtney. It was a woman in her late 60s, maybe early 70s, wearing simple dark slacks and a cream blouse. She had short white hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She walked with a slight limp but carried herself with the kind of quiet authority you notice immediately, without being able to explain why. She sat down in the chair across from me without asking if I minded, which I liked. People who ask if they can sit beside you in an otherwise empty space always make me slightly nervous. "You're the vet," she said. "Not a question." "I am," I said. "Large animal. Mostly. Emergency and critical care, Northern Ontario. She nodded slowly, like this answer meant something specific to her. Long drive, she said. Long drives, I agreed. We sat quietly for a moment. Inside, I could hear my father's laugh carrying through the window, the big performance laugh he used when he wanted Bryce's father to find him charming. He didn't used to talk about you that way, she said, nodding toward the restaurant. I looked at her. I'm sorry, do we know each other? Not yet, she said. I'm Bryce's grandmother, Nana June. She extended a hand and I shook it. Her grip was firm and dry. I was a professor of veterinary medicine at Guelph for 32 years, retired now mostly. Something shifted behind my sternum. I looked at her again, the posture, the glasses, the way she'd asked large animal, like it was a diagnostic question. Oh, I said. I stepped outside to get some air, she said, and I heard what your father said at the table. She paused. And I stayed to see how you'd react. A small, careful smile. I appreciate that you didn't give him the satisfaction. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at the dark tree line. What's your focus? She asked specifically. And for the first time in about 4 years, I actually told someone. Not the edited apologetic version I gave at family dinners, the real one. The emergency triage protocols I'd developed for remote callouts. The partnership I was building with 3 First Nations communities in the north to provide veterinary access to their livestock herds. The paper I'd submitted to the Canadian Veterinary Journal 6 weeks ago and hadn't told anyone about because I didn't want to deal with my father's follow-up questions about whether it paid well. Nana June listened without looking at her phone once. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment. That paper, she said. Is it the one on emergency field anesthesia for large animals in sub-zero conditions? I stared at her. You read it? I'm on the editorial review board, she said simply. She stood up, smoothing the front of her slacks. It's exceptional work, Margot. She said my name the way people say it when they've just learned it and want to confirm they have it right. I'll see you tomorrow. She went inside. I sat by the unlit fire for a long time after that. I don't remember much else about the rehearsal dinner. I drove back to the inn I'd booked, which was a 40-minute drive from the venue, because all the rooms closer had been reserved months ago. By my mother, for Courtney's bridal party, which I was not part of. I lay in bed and thought about Nana June's face when she said exceptional work, and I tried to hold on to it because I knew the next day was going to be hard. I didn't know how hard. The morning of the wedding, I got a text from my mother at 7:43 a.m. Please don't wear anything that looks too outdoorsy. Bryce's family has a certain aesthetic and we want to make a good impression. Maybe keep the hair down. I looked at this text for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the nightstand and got dressed. I had brought one dress. I'd bought it 8 months ago for colleagues' retirement dinner in Thunder Bay. It was a deep forest green, midi length, fitted through the bodice. I was not a person who bought a lot of dresses. This one fit well and I felt like myself in it. I also brought the thing I was most proud of owning, a hand-stitched leather satchel I'd been given by a family in a small community north of Timmins, after I'd spent 3 days saving their herd following a respiratory outbreak that could have ended them. They'd had the satchel made by a local artisan. My initials were on the brass clasp. I looked in the mirror before I left. I thought, this is fine. This is more than fine. I arrived at the venue at noon for the 2 o'clock ceremony. Courtney had asked me to help with setup things in the morning. Vaguely, without specifying what, and I'd said I would. I found my mother near the entrance coordinating with the florist. She looked at my dress. Then she looked at my satchel. Then she looked at my hair, which was up. Because I'd been driving for 40 minutes and it was humid and I'd made a decision. I said hair down, she said quietly so the florist wouldn't hear. I know, I said. This was more comfortable. She exhaled through her nose. And that bag, it was a gift. It looks like something you'd take to a barn. It had been to many barns. That was part of why I loved it. I didn't say this. My mother stepped closer, dropping her voice further. Bryce's family, his mother especially, she notices things. She commented on the floral arrangements twice. She is a very specific person, and today is about making a certain impression and I need you to understand that. I understand, I said. The satchel. I'm keeping the satchel, Mum. She pressed her lips together, then she pointed me toward the back of the venue where apparently I was needed to help arrange welcome bags for guests. Which is to say, she sent me where I wouldn't be visible. I arranged welcome bags for 45 minutes. Nobody came to check on me. Eventually I heard the music starting, so as I found my seat, which was assigned, I'd discovered, in the second to last row on the bride's side, near the corner where a structural column partially blocked the view of the altar. I sat down. I told myself it didn't matter. The ceremony was beautiful. Courtney walked down the aisle and she looked genuinely radiant, and for a moment I forgot about everything else and just felt something warm in my chest for her. She'd wanted this for so long. Whatever I thought about the circumstances, I could be glad she was getting it. It was during the reception, just after the meal, that my father stood up to give his toast. He is a practiced public speaker. He does it for work. He runs a mid-sized engineering consulting firm and spends a lot of time in front of clients. He knows how to work a room. He spoke for 11 minutes about Courtney, her warmth, her creativity, her ability to light up a room. He called her his greatest achievement with absolutely no irony. He talked about how proud he was that she'd found a partner whose family shared their values. Then he looked at me. I don't know why he did it. I've thought about it many times since. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe he needed a counterpoint to make Courtney's story feel more dramatic. Maybe it was just habit, the way he'd always used me as the straight line that made her the punchline. We're a family of contrasts, he said, still smiling, still in full performance mode. Courtney found her place in the world early. My other daughter, Margot, she went her own way. He chuckled warmly, inviting the room to chuckle with him. 7 years of school to work with cows, I always say, a few polite laughs. Very meaningful, I'm sure. He raised his glass toward Courtney. But today we're celebrating the one who figured it out. 400 people in the room. Bryce's family in the front rows. Colleagues of my father's I'd known since childhood. And he stood at the microphone and looked directly at me and called my life's work a consolation prize. I kept my face completely still. I'd had a lot of practice. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Nana June was sitting 4 tables away from me, and that she had already, before the reception even began, made 3 phone calls. I found out about the phone calls later. The first was to the Dean of the Ontario Veterinary College. The second was to the chair of the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. The third was to a former student of hers who now ran the largest large animal emergency network in the province, a woman named Dr. Asha, who had trained under Nana June 20 years ago, and who had been trying to get my attention for 6 months regarding a research partnership I'd been too buried in callouts to properly respond to. Nana June had read my paper on the editorial board. She had been watching my name come up in peer reviews for 2 years. And when she heard my father at the rehearsal dinner, and then again at the toast, something in her made a decision. At 4:17 p.m., while Courtney and Bryce were taking photos on the grounds, my phone vibrated in my satchel. I slipped it out under the table. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. "This is June Whitmore Hale. Please stay where you are. There's something coming. You've earned it." I stared at my phone. Then I looked across the room. Nana June caught my eye from 4 tables over and gave me one single small nod. I had no idea what was about to happen, but something in the way she sat, spine straight, perfectly still, the expression of someone who had made a decision and was done second-guessing it, told me to trust it. 15 minutes later, the doors at the back of the reception hall opened. They didn't burst open dramatically. They swung open in the way doors swing open when the person on the other side isn't performing an entrance, just walking through because they have somewhere to be. A woman entered first. She was wearing the dark blazer and lanyard of someone at a professional event. Behind her came another woman, then a man, then 4 more people, then a larger group behind that. They were all wearing name badges. The estate had a second venue space attached to it, a smaller hall used for corporate events, and I later learned that, entirely by coincidence, the Ontario Veterinary College's annual research symposium had been booked into that space for that same Saturday. It was the most significant professional gathering in Canadian veterinary medicine that year. 400 attendees, the top researchers, practitioners, and educators in the field, from across the country. Nana June had been on the planning committee. She had known about the scheduling overlap for weeks. She had said nothing to my family. The attendees were moving through the adjoining corridor, and some of them had wandered toward the sound of the reception, pausing in the doorway. And then Dr. Asha, who had just finished presenting her keynote, walked in looking for Nana June, and stopped. She saw me. She turned to the person behind her and said something, and that person turned to someone else, and within 30 seconds the doorway was full. Not pushing or crowding, just filling. The quiet, dense kind of feeling that happens when a lot of professionals in the same field suddenly find themselves in the same space. My father had not noticed yet. He was at the bar with Bryce's father. Nana June stood up from her table. She moved to the center of the room with her slight limp and her straight back, and she picked up the small wireless microphone that the DJ had left on the head table during the meal break. She didn't ask permission. She didn't announce herself. She just tapped the mic twice, and the room went quiet. "My name is June Whitmore Hale," she said. Her voice was clear and dry and utterly calm. "I'm a professor emerita of veterinary medicine at the University of Guelph. I'm also very proud to be Bryce's grandmother, and I want to offer a toast of my own." People settled. Bryce's mother looked confused. My mother looked worried. My father turned from the bar, still holding his scotch. "A few minutes ago," Nana June said, "someone at this microphone described a career in veterinary medicine as something a person does when they haven't figured it out. I'd like to offer a gentle correction." The room was very quiet. 6 weeks ago, a paper was submitted to the Canadian Veterinary Journal. The editorial board, of which I am a member, reviewed it unanimously as one of the most significant contributions to field emergency medicine we've seen in a decade. The paper establishes a new protocol for large animal critical care in remote and sub-zero conditions. It was developed from 6 years of practice in Northern Ontario, often alone, often in conditions that most of us in this room would find genuinely frightening. She paused. It was written by the woman sitting in the back corner of this reception hall, the one with the beautiful leather satchel. Somebody laughed softly, a warm laugh, not a mocking one. "I also want to note," Nana June continued, "that this same woman has spent the last 2 years building a veterinary access program for 3 First Nations communities in the north, working entirely on a cost recovery model because she believed it mattered. The Canadian Veterinary Medical Association will be formally recognizing this program at our annual conference in October." She looked at the doorway where the symposium attendees had gathered. "Many of my colleagues here today are familiar with her work. Some of them have been trying to collaborate with her for months." I was sitting very still. I could feel the blood in my face. My father had set down his scotch. Nana June turned toward me. She was small and she had a slight limp, and she was the most powerful person in the room. "Margot," she said, "would you come up here, please?" I stood. My chair scraped back. I walked across the reception hall with 350 eyes on me and my satchel over my shoulder because I was not leaving it at the table. When I reached her, she shook my hand. Not an air kiss, not a hug. A handshake, firm and precise, the way people shake hands when they mean something by it. Then Dr. Asha stepped forward from the doorway. She was 40-something, compact with the kind of no-nonsense efficiency that comes from decades of emergency work. She walked up to me and said quietly, "I've been reading your case notes for 8 months. I should have called sooner. I'm sorry I didn't. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, thank you." One of the symposium attendees, a man I recognized from a paper on equine cardiology I'd cited in my thesis, started clapping. It wasn't a polite, performative clap. It was the specific clap, someone who actually means it. It spread. First the people in the doorway, then the tables nearest the door, then through the room, 400 people. Colleagues, researchers, clinicians, professors, and the wedding guests, who by now understood enough to know they were witnessing something, even if they didn't fully understand what. I stood at the front of the room and I didn't cry, which surprised me because I'd expected to. I just felt something release somewhere in my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding closed for about 7 years. I looked at my father. He was standing by the bar. His face had gone through several versions of itself in the last 4 minutes. He'd started with confusion, moved through irritation, and arrived somewhere that looked, for the first time in my memory, like something approaching reckoning. Bryce's father was standing beside him. He was not looking at my father warmly. Nana June handed me the microphone because she apparently thought I should say something, and she was probably right. I held it for a moment. I wasn't going to perform. I wasn't going to give a speech about overcoming adversity or rising above. That's not how I talk, and it's not who I am. So, I just said what was true. "I love what I do," I said. "I've loved it since I was 12 years old and I helped my uncle's neighbor with a calving emergency and something just clicked. I didn't choose it because I couldn't think of anything better. I chose it because nothing else has ever felt like home." I paused. "I'm sorry it took this long for some of you to hear that." I handed the microphone back to Nana June. She gave me one small satisfied nod. I walked back to my table. A woman I didn't know touched my arm as I passed and said, "That program in the north, my cousin's community has been waiting for something like that for years." I stopped and looked at her. We talked for 3 minutes in the middle of the reception hall and exchanged numbers. The DJ eventually resumed his set. The bar reopened. The wedding continued technically. But the shape of the room had changed in a way that couldn't be undone. Bryce's father pulled my father aside near the windows about 20 minutes later. I wasn't close enough to hear the conversation, but I saw my father's face during it, and that was enough. He had been mining that connection for 18 months. The dealership family, the social access, the implied endorsement. Whatever Bryce's father said to him, it took about 4 minutes, and my father nodded through most of it with the expression of a man doing arithmetic he doesn't like the answer to. My mother found me by the dessert table. She'd been trying to catch my eye for an hour, but I hadn't let her. "Margot," she said. "Mum, I didn't know," she said. "About the paper, about the program, we didn't know." I looked at her. She meant it, which made it harder, not easier. "You didn't ask," I said, not unkindly, just as a fact. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Her eyes were wet, which I hadn't expected. My mother was not generally a crier. "I should have asked," she said. "Yes," I said. We stood there for a moment. I didn't hug her and she didn't try to hug me. But she put her hand on my arm briefly, and then she walked away. And I think that was both of us doing the best we could manage right then. Courtney found me near the end of the night, just before the last dance. She'd been avoiding me all evening, which I'd expected and I hadn't pushed. But she came and stood beside me while the DJ played something slow and the older guests swayed on the floor, and she said, "I didn't know about the program either." "That's okay," I said. "It's not actually," she said, which surprised me. "You're my sister and I didn't ask." She paused. "I was always jealous of you, you know. You always knew what you wanted." I looked at her. "You always seemed so certain too." She laughed, short and rueful. "I just hid the uncertainty better." She looked at the dance floor. "Your friend, the professor, she told me a little about what you've been doing. She didn't have to do that." "No," I said. "She didn't." "She's remarkable," Courtney said. "She really is." We didn't hug either, but we stood there together until the song ended, and that felt like more than we'd managed in a long time. My father didn't come to find me that night. I didn't expect him to. He is not a man who processes things quickly, and reckoning doesn't look like a single conversation for people like him. It looks like a slow, uncomfortable erosion, and whether it amounts to anything is a question I've stopped holding my breath to answer. What I know is this. Dr. Asha and I had coffee the following Tuesday, and by Thursday we'd agreed to a formal research partnership, with 3 co-investigators and a grant application already drafted by Friday. Nana June has been copied on every email since. The paper was accepted for publication in the Canadian Veterinary Journal 4 weeks later, with a note from the editorial board calling it a foundational contribution to the field. My satchel, for the record, made it into 2 of the professional photographs taken that evening by symposium attendees. It looks exactly like what it is, something handmade and worn and given with care. I have no complaints. I used to lie awake and replay every dinner, every offhand comment, every toast, and wonder what I was missing, what I could have done differently, why it never felt like enough. I don't do that anymore. Not because I've forgiven everything or made peace with every hurt. Some things just sit in you, and that's honest. But because I understand now that I was spending a lot of energy trying to earn recognition from people who had already decided what I was worth before I'd had a chance to demonstrate otherwise. The people who actually knew what I'd built didn't need me to prove anything. They were already reading the work. If you've ever been the one at the end of the table, the one who went the wrong way, the one who didn't fit the plan your family had for you, I want you to know the work is worth doing anyway. Build it in the dark if you have to. The right people will find it. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from and whether any of this landed for you. If it did, please hit like and subscribe. There's more where this came from, and I promise you, none of it is about giving up.